In the previous lesson, we spent some time inserting tables into a presentation. So you can see here I'm still working on Eat Cake 8a, and we inserted two tables in the previous lesson. So we're going to continue with these tables, editing them, and formatting them. So to make changes to these tables, there's a number of different things we can do, all from the ribbon. Now, if you're jumping to this lesson, no problem. You can go to the Office button up here, click Open. And from the Lesson 8 folder of your exercise files, open up Eat Cake 8b. Give that one a click, and when you hit Open, scroll down to slide number 7. Give that a click, and just click inside this table right here in the first cell, and you'll be all caught up with us. Excellent. So from here, let's do a little bit of formatting to our tables. Now, with this table selected, and you can see the lower table is selected because it's got this border, and that just came from clicking inside one of the cells in a table. And we can click right on the border, so we're not flashing in a cell. That means any changes we make now will apply to the entire table. So the Table Tools is kind of shaded up here over the Design and Layout tab. That means if I click the Design tab, it's going to be Table Design. If I click the Layout tab, it's going to be Table Layout. And you can see there's lots of options. So let's go through a bunch of these. We'll start with the Design. I really like some of the things in the design here. We'll start over here at Table Style Options. And you can see already we've got a header row and we've got banded rows. And that's the alternating colors here after the top row, which is our header row. So if we wanted a total row, let's say, where totals would show up, we click on that, and you can see what's happened at the bottom. But what you might not have noticed is over here in the Table Style section that all of these different styles here have also changed to include that total row at the bottom. So take a look over here when we deselect total row. See how it disappears from these previews up here. Same thing goes if we wanted to shade the first or last column in our table. We click it here, we see it in the table itself, but we also see it up here for the table styles. Because if we wanted to choose a different table style, all of these options on the left will still apply. So let's go over here to the table styles, click the drop down, and look at them all. We've got lots to choose from. Now it's kind of hard to see them when we expand this entire dialog here to see what's happening in the background, but the changes are happening. We've got that live preview that we've talked about through so many lessons. I'm going to choose this one here, and it's the second last one in the dark, the first row of the dark section. As you hover over it, you see it's Dark Style 1, Accent 5. Okay, so that looks much different than our first table. So that's just choosing some table styles. Now, this is kind of cool here. We can also change the fill. Now, we would want to select rows or columns that we want to change the shading or fill for. Same thing goes for the borders. So, for example, this top row, it's currently black. I'm going to click in here and click and drag across all 5 cells across the top row. I'll come up here to the shading, and let's just choose a different color. Now, as we hover over these different colors, you can see I actually get that live preview. Okay, I'm going to choose this one right here. Pink Accent 1, it's lighter by 40%. Okay, now my top row is still selected or highlighted, so I'll just click in another cell to deselect to see the change. Okay, let's go back here. I want to make some changes now to this top row again, so I'm going to click and drag across. And I'm going to go up here to this little guy here where I get to apply some effects. And you can do some cool things with these effects like cell bevels. So if I come down here and I hover over some of these, you're going to see a live preview down below of just the top row getting affected by these different bevel styles. So I can hover over them till I see one that I like. I get a 3D look for these things. That's kind of cool right there. Hover over them till you find the one you like. I'm going to go back to this one here called Slope and give it a click. I'll deselect that top row by clicking. So there's that 3D effect on my top row. Of course, I could select the entire table and do it for every cell in the table, but sometimes that can be too much. So with the top row selected, I made the change. That looks kind of neat. Now let's go up to our first table up here where we actually have some text. And I'm going to select this entire top row. There we go. All right, so with the top row selected, let's go over to our word art styles now, because we can apply quick styles and then we've got some other word art options. So if I click on the quick styles and I hover over some of these, you can see their changes in the live preview. So this is called word art. Sometimes the word art creates too large a font that'll fit for those cells. But as soon as you find one that you like, and I'm going to go back up to this one right up here, the very first option, and give it a click. And you can see my change. I'll deselect that top row to really see the finished product. So that's using Quick Styles. Let's go in the first cell, click and drag across the entire top row again. And this time you can see we can do some text effects. We can also play around with the text outline and the text fill as well. So we've done this before working with fonts in this title, so we don't really need to recap that, just so that you know it's here for working inside tables as well. But I'm going to go down to the text effects, and I'm going to go over to my shadow here and see if adding a shadow is going to help. There we go. That's a cool one right there. And I've also got some inners and some perspectives down below, which is kind of cool. I'm going to go to this one here right in the middle, perspective, and you can see a bit of a shadow in behind. Just adds to the 3D effect. Alright, so down below where I've got my banded rows, you can see that the borders are white in between. So if I wanted this first group of cells here, I'm going to click and drag from the 1, 2, 3 down to the bottom. And if I wanted to, I could change borders, and I could change borders around the entire table, or just within the cells, columns, or rows. Now in the draw section here, we're talking about the pen color that's used for drawing tables, and of course we can erase lines as well. Now I don't know if you've had an opportunity or you wanted to look at the Microsoft Word title, but there's a whole lesson on tables, and it applies here in PowerPoint too, which is kind of neat, because all of the options we're seeing across the top here on our ribbon are the exact same options we see in Microsoft Word. In other words, our table options here apply across the suite, not just here in PowerPoint, not just in Microsoft Word. I want to go up to the Layout tab though. And here's where we can do some things with rows and columns, merging cells, changing their size, their alignment, so the text inside is aligned, adjust their heights and widths, and then we've got some options for arranging as well over here. So for this particular column here, which I've got selected from the 1, 2, 3 all the way down, it's still selected. If I wanted to change it so that everything inside these cells is centered, all of the text is centered, I come to my alignment section here, and I'm going to go to this guy right here to center. Now I can also have it so that it's aligned to the top, center, or bottom of the cell. I'm going to go center, center. Now the cell in this case fits the text nicely, so we don't see much of adjustment there, but just so you know, if you've got a large cell and you got small text, it can be right in the center of that cell if you wanted it to. Now we have some options for table size over here for adjusting borders and so on, but we can do that ourselves. It's kind of neat. So for example, I don't need so much room for the item column. I can go over here, I'm just going to click to deselect, and go to the border in between these two columns. And you can see I get the double arrow icon. And I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it to the left to decrease the width of this first column. Now description will probably need more room. So if I wanted to, total for example, I could drag its border over to the right. Same thing for quantity. Drag that over. Price doesn't need such a wide column. Make sure I see the double arrow, click and drag. And look at the nice room I have now for my descriptions. So that's manually moving them. If I wanted them to be exact widths, I could also do that. So you can see we've got here for our cell size, we've got both a width and a height for our rows. So row height and column width. So if this column here had to be a certain figure so that it fit nicely on my page, and I want it to be exact, I could type it in right here. So you can see right now the column width is 1.08. So if I want it to be 1 inch exactly, I'll just bump the arrow down or type in 1. Perfect. If I want the same thing for each of these, I click anywhere in the column, doesn't matter what row, and I can change that till I get to 1. Now you can see because I'm doing it here in one of these columns as opposed to starting on the far right, that the width of my entire table is narrowing. Let's do it for quantity. I don't know how far down we can go before it doesn't fit. No, we'll leave it at 1.3. And the last column, we'll bump it down slightly, a couple of clicks down to 1 inch. And you can see now my table doesn't stretch across the entire width. So if I wanted to, I could move that over. I'm going to click and drag with the 4-sided arrow. And as I go to the borders, you can see there are little dots in the corners and midway on the sides. So I can get the double arrow to stretch my table out. And then I could readjust again if I wanted to. Okay. So this particular column, it needs to be 1 inch. Perfect. All right. So that's playing around with the actual fit of our table. So what we're doing here is kind of editing the style of our table. We have a lot of other options here for inserting and removing rows and columns. So you can see here we've got an insert above, so we could add a new row directly above the row that we're in if we wanted to. Quite typically, you run out of space as you're typing. I'm going to click in this table down below and just move it down further. And we'll just say that we filled all of this in and we've got to the last cell and we need a new row. Well, we can insert a new row and we could insert it below. Or, watch what happens when I click in this last cell and I hit my tab key on the keyboard. It knows I've run out of rows and it needs to add a new row so I could continue typing. Now a neat thing that we can do, let's say this bottom row we needed it because what we want is a grand total down here. So it would be neat if we could merge all of these cells and just leave one down here and one wide one over here. So I'm going to click and drag over these cells here. With those selected, I'm going to stop short of that last one. I'm going to merge those cells. And as soon as I do, now what I've got, you can see here, is just one big cell and then one small one over here for the total. So I'm going to click in here. I'm going to right align my text, even though I don't have any yet. My flashing cursor's on the right now, and I can type in grand total, for example. And then the actual total would go in there. That's kind of cool. The same goes for splitting cells. So if I actually wanted this big cell to be 2, I click anywhere in there, click on split, and decide how many columns I want. So number of columns and rows. So if I leave it at 2 and click OK, you can see how it just got split into 2. I still have my third one over here. I'm going to click undo to undo that. Doesn't make sense. Okay. Lots of alignment options, even text directions. Here's our cell margins. So for example, if I wanted to change the amount of space between my text and the colored border that we see here, cell margins allows me to get exact widths. And of course I can do custom margins as well. But I've got a number to choose from here. You can see narrow, none, normal. If I want my text to go right up against the edge, I would choose none. So I've got zeros all the way around. So that just gives me a little more room to type before it wraps around in the actual cell. Okay. Alright, so we've done a lot of modifying in the layout and we've played around with the design in this table down below. So now you've got all the tools you need for inserting tables into a slide in a presentation and then making that table stand out by modifying its design and its layout.